Hi, so this week one of the first approaches that we're going to be looking at is the social learning theory. So our main objectives are to understand and apply what vicarious reinforcement is. You'll be learning more about that later on. We're going to develop our knowledge and understanding and evaluation of Banjora's Bobo doll study. We're also going to understand and apply what identification and modelling is with regards to human behaviour. And we're going to look at the role of mediational processes, so how we actually learn our behaviour, what are the four processes going on there. Okay, so if you can get your booklet ready and turn to page 10 in your booklet, please. Okay. Also as well, can we be making sure that your folders are organised? This is really, really important always, but even more so now. So you should have a lever arch folder for paper 1 and another one for paper 2, and this is how it should be organised. So paper 1, we have done the majority of this. We've completed social influence, attachments and memory. We've still got to cover psychopathology. We will be doing that on your return in year 13. Paper 2, research methods, is partially done. We have nearly finished that. We're working on approaches. Again, we will be nearly finishing that before we finish for summer, and biological psychology as well. So make sure that you're organising folders. If you can't get a hold of a lever arch at the moment, just make sure that you're putting them together so everything is ready and organised for when you can get some folders. Okay, so let's go back to your booklet then. Above the heading of social learning theory on page 10, can you please add number 2 and write this as well? Example question, outline and evaluate the social learning theory to understand human behaviour. 16 marks. So remember, it is just an example question. Can you also add these two at the bottom of page 10 as well? Another example question, or two of them, sorry, discuss the value and contribution of the social learning theory. It should be there to our understanding of human behaviour. And then another question, compare and contrast the social learning theory with the cognitive approach. We're going to be moving on to the cognitive approach next, and when you come back after summer, we will be working on the compare and contrast questions a lot more. Okay, so make sure that you add them. Okay, so what are we looking at first of all? What is the social learning theory? What we're looking at, it is built from the behavioural approach, but we're going a bit further than stimulus response learning. We're actually adding a bit of cognition there. It's not just an automated process anymore, our human behaviour. Yes, we still have that stimulus from the environment, but there's some mediational processes involved. So we're paying attention to something, we retain that information, we try and reproduce that behaviour, and we're motivated to do it. So there's a bit of reinforcement there as part of that. And then our output behaviour is the response. Okay, so when we looked at behaviourism, that was just stimulus response. Okay, so for example, classical conditioning, that was learning by association. Operant conditioning, that was learning through reinforcement. Now we're actively engaged in this ourselves. Okay, so Albert Banjora there, you can see a picture of him there. He built on the behavioural approach and he's really focused on environmental learning. So he argued people learn indirectly, vicariously. We're not aware sometimes that we're actually observing as much as we do. But we do, and this is how we develop our behaviour. We imitate role models. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples of that as we move through. So the first point, and what you might want to be doing as we're going along, is making some revision notes, making your record cards as we're going along, and you can use these to help you out as well. Also go back to these to help you with the glossary. Make sure you're highlighting in the booklet and make a little note in pencil of anything that you do not understand as well. So we've mentioned it briefly, this vicarious reinforcement. If an individual observes a behaviour being reinforced, you're likely to imitate it. Because you've seen the consequences. So if you see your friend, let's go back to an example from the question, litter picking, and the teacher says, right, you're going to get 5-10 minutes of extra play today, or 5 stickers for your team, your class team, etc., it's likely you will imitate that behaviour because there's an incentive for you. You've seen the consequence. You're not going to imitate something where you think, oh, no, they're not getting nothing from that. You imitate behaviour because you expect similar consequences. Okay, usually because there's something in it for you as well. Okay, now if we turn over to page 11 in your booklet, quite a famous experiment by Banjora is the Bobo doll study. In the next slide, there are videos of this. You can look at a variety of videos on YouTube with regards to this as well. Okay, so we really wanted to investigate this vicarious reinforcement. Okay, so it was an experiment, well controlled. Obviously be thinking about evaluation before we even started, but it's an experiment, it's well controlled. So anyway, this was the procedure. So half a group of children was shown an aggressive adult. So they showed specific physical and verbally aggressive behaviours towards a Bobo doll, and the other half of the group of children was shown a non-aggressive adult, and then they were taken to a room where they could play with a variety of toys, and there was the same Bobo doll in there. Now, I hope you're all thinking in your head that this is an independent groups design. If you're not, don't worry. And you could add that to the side next to the picture. I'm just looking at next to the picture of the Bobo doll. Keep your methods in mind. So it's an independent group study here. Okay, this is what they found. You can probably guess what they found. So they found that those who observed the aggressive model reproduced, in common sense language, acted out or imitated the aggression shown towards the Bobo doll, and a third actually reproduced the verbally aggressive remarks, where those who were shown the non-aggressive adult, the model, showed virtually no aggression. There wasn't none, but virtually no aggression. Also as well, there's quite a few follow-up studies, but just for your booklet, if they saw the adult being rewarded with sweets, they were even more likely to imitate that behaviour. Okay, so we're going to be looking at, well, why are they doing this? Because in the original study, there wasn't any reward. They just saw an adult being aggressive, or in the other group, an adult being non-aggressive. So let's move on. The next slide will take you to a link though for the video. Okay, so if you want to click on that or put that into YouTube, or just put the Bobo doll study into YouTube, a plethora of videos of the original footage will come up. And you might think, why we're looking at a study from so long ago? Because it was pioneering at the time, and it really was important because he carried out this research when TV was being brought into American homes. It led the way for the watershed, so not showing anything aggressive or swearing or really violent behaviour before the 9 o'clock watershed, because we knew that if kids saw this, they would be carrying out those acts. Now you might think, well, there's the internet now, etc. Yes, there is, and there are controls in place for that, but it really does show how children do imitate others. Okay, so let's have a look at why they're doing it now. So we've got something known as identification and modelling. So this is a kind of question that you could get in the exam. So why are they more likely to imitate the behaviour of people whom they identify with? Okay, it's because they're role models, and it's a process known as modelling. So a person becomes a role model if they have similar characteristics to themselves. So that can include gender, it could include even clothing that they're wearing, race, etc. Also, if they're seen as more attractive, if they have a higher status. So, for example, children will see adults as having a higher status than themselves, and we could argue that no, they don't, but generally they see adults as having I don't know, say kind of like it's like a power relationship. So parents will joke, oh, they behave for the teacher, but they don't behave for me. It's that kind of thing. Okay. Now, in the exam as well, you could be asked about the role of mediational processes. It's basically the process of how this occurs, and I'm going to give you an acronym to help you with that, which you can already see on the screen. So as we know, right from the start of this lesson, it's not traditional behaviourism. It's not just about stimulus response. There's a bit of cognition in here as well. We're looking at mental processes. So we have these processes going on to determine whether a new response is acquired. And he identified 4 mediational processes. And if you can remember this off by heart and social learning theory comes up, you will do fine in the exam. Okay, so first of all, they are going to pay attention. Now, I'm not saying that they're looking around, but if somebody's doing a behaviour which stands out, or you're just watching it on TV or on YouTube, it's what they notice about that behaviour. So for example, last year all kids were flossing, doing dances from Fortnite, etc., because they've paid attention to it. Also as well, it's retaining that information. So it's retaining how to do that specific dance. So at the moment, TikTok. Okay, don't get me started on TikTok. Some of you may have done your own TikTok videos. I'm only jealous because I can't do it properly. So we're paying attention to those at the moment in lockdown. We're remembering what they're doing. We're trying to reproduce that. So can we reproduce that behaviour? And we're motivated to do it because, one, it might make us feel good, or we're identifying with other people who we look up to, or we've seen them getting a lot of likes on their social media, or for example, footballing skills. Okay, paying attention to how they're doing keepy uppies. That's our house at the moment. They're retaining how to do that. They're reproducing that behaviour and getting better each time because, you know, my son wants to be like one of his favourite football players. Okay, as well, just because somebody's not model that behaviour straight away, it doesn't mean learning's not taken place. So a lot of you now will be, well, not at the moment, but before lockdown and hopefully soon after it, you'll be doing driving lessons. Okay, so you might, you know, do your first lesson, or I can't do this, I'm rubbish, I'm never going to pass my test. But after a while, you will do it. Okay, so those mediational processes have occurred and you've retained that information, but it's just not overtly reproduced immediately. So internal mental processes have gone on there. Okay, so let's have a look now if we can turn to page 12. Okay, we're going to evaluate it. You've got your full peel paragraphs in your booklet. On your essay plan, in your essay, please make sure that you are fully peeling. And I'm going to go through with the first 2 paragraphs where to put your PELs again. Okay, so one strength is that it is scientific. Put a P next to that. So we've got some missing words here. This means that, so just put an E in the side of the margin there. The theory focuses on observable behaviour, and it's measurable, which can be tested in controlled conditions. For example, so put another E in your margin there. Banjura's Bobo doll research is highly controlled, and the learning demonstrated by the children was clear to observe and measure. And then put an L, so we're linking back. This is a positive as it means the approach is supported by empirical evidence. So that is the missing word there, empirical. Okay, the next one there, can you put a P next to this? However, the social learning theory doesn't incorporate mediational processes which can be observed. So for example, my son practicing keepy uppies, I can't observe what's going on inside his mind when this is occurring. So if you put an E, this means that factors like attention and motivation have to be inferred. I'm just guessing that, is taking it all in. You're learning to drive, your driving instructor hoping that you are taking this in. Okay, you might want to put an example there for that. So where it says attention and motivation have to be inferred, for example, we cannot directly observe the mediational processes. Okay, and then linking back, put an L. This is a problem as the inference could be mistaken, meaning we cannot empirically measure all aspects of SLT. So it's a bit of guesswork, really. Okay, so that can be problematic. However, what is great about the social learning theory, it's got practical applications. As a teacher, we can use lots of aspects of social learning theory. I've seen my own children going through these mediational processes. We want good role models for young people. So let's go through this. So another strength of SLT, it's got those practical applications. This means concepts like identification and modelling have been used not for therapy, but say in educational settings or as actually rewards. It's not very ethical, but we also have token economy, not used as much now, where patients would get rewarded for appropriate behaviour. We'll look more at that when we look at schizophrenia. But for example, in your booklet, so anti-alcohol adverts increase the effectiveness of a message. So if somebody in an advertisement we can relate to, that will help us to reduce our alcohol intake. So we can use social learning theory and media in everyday situations to change behaviour. Okay, a lot of the original research by Banjora, though, problem, it's based on evidence from young children in a lab setting, so therefore it lacks ecological validity. Again, they were just being aggressive towards a Bobo doll. It's not a real person. Okay, children will play rough and tumble. They watch something on telly and it's rough and tumble, they will imitate that, but they know right and wrong, and they know it's not real aggression either. Okay, as well, were they doing it because they're expected to do that? So some demand characteristics there as well. So this has an impact on validity. So we're not truly measuring the mediational processes, and also vicarious reinforcement, which is what Banjora was mainly researching there. So there's some flawed evidence there. Okay, if we turn to page 13, however, it is less reductionist than the behaviouralist approach. It's kind of saying we have some internal control over this with regards to cognitive factors. So let's have a look at the missing words here. So, however, SLT may be praised for being less reductionist than the behavioural approach that preceded it. This means that SLT has incorporated internal cognitive factors not considered by behaviourists and how these interact with external influences. So what we're talking about there are the mediational processes. So for example, SLT argues attention and retention can mediate environmental learning. Okay, so those are your missing words there, attention and retention. And this is a positive because although SLT may still ignore other factors involved in behaviour such as biology, it's a more holistic explanation because it's including behavioural aspects and cognitive processes as well. Okay. The last point there, again, it's kind of saying, well, it's less determinist than the behavioural approach. The determinist aspects of the behavioural approach was, well, if you get a stimulus, you'll respond, whether that's through that association or through reinforcements. Social learning theory doesn't do that. Okay, so it's saying factors from the environment are not totally controlling our behaviour. Internal cognitive factors are also involved. So if we have a look in the booklet there, so about 4 lines down, it instead argues we do have some ability to mediate the influence of the environment, which helps us to explain why we don't all respond in the same way to our environment. So it's kind of like a middle ground. So it's really in the middle of determinism, that behaviour is determined by the environment, but there's also an element of free will as well. So if you remember, we talked about that in our introduction to approaches. Okay, so what you can also have a go at, and you might want to make record cards of these again to help you with your revision notes, is a little bit of a quiz here. In class, normally we'd have our whiteboards to do this. So the behaviourist approach argues all human behaviour can be explained in terms of something through the environment. Hopefully you've got the right answer. Learning. Okay, so you might want to get that down as a record card, put the answer on the back, or get your phone now, or go back to this, do a Quizlet cards as well. Okay, number 2, there are 2 types of learning or conditioning according to the behaviourist approach, which are, okay, and hopefully you're saying classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So well done if you got those right. So we're just doing a recap now of the lesson. Make sure you've learned something. And remember, you can always go back to these. You don't have to do the full lesson all in one bit. Just do 5-minute chunks here and there. Number 3, classical conditioning, which is learning by something, was first demonstrated by Ivan something investigating salivation in... Okay, so we've got association, Pavlov, dogs. So it's quite a lengthy one, this, so you might want to write this out, pause me here, and then start filling in the responses. Okay, so let's go through this. So food, which was an unconditioned stimulus, naturally causes salivation, which is an unconditioned response. Pavlov conditioned the dogs to salivate to the sound of a bell, which is the neutral stimulus. The bell was rang and the dog was immediately given food, causing the dog to salivate. The dog associated the bell and the food. Eventually, the bell on its own became the conditioned stimulus, which produces salivation, the conditioned response. Now, if you learn that little diagram with what we do off by heart, you can apply that to any scenario which comes up on classical conditioning. Okay. Number 5, again, you might want to write this down first, so just pause me. Okay, so operant conditioning, which is learning by reinforcement, was first demonstrated by Skinner. Operant conditioning focuses on the consequences of behaviour. I know it sounds bad, but when I say Skinner, I always think of The Simpsons when they shout Skinner. Sorry, bad imitation there. Okay, another one, you might want to write these down, leave a gap, and then pause me. Okay, one consequence is positive reinforcement, which is the addition of something positive. In Skinner's study, every time the rat pressed a lever, it was rewarded with a food pellet. From then on, the rat would continue to perform the behaviour. Again, pause me, get this down. So another consequence is negative reinforcement, which is the removal of something unpleasant. In Skinner's studies, the rats had to press the lever to avoid a mild but uncomfortable electric current beneath their feet. I know we've got ethics involved here, folks. This type of reinforcement also increases the likelihood of a behaviour continuing. So again, pause me. So one strength of the behaviourist approach is that it is scientific. This means that the approach does focus on observable and measurable behaviour, e.g. Pavlov and Skinner's research was conducted in controlled lab settings. This is a positive, as it means the approach is empirical and supported by empirical or scientific evidence. Again, pause me. So, however, a problem with the approach is that it is largely based on animal studies. This means that the research conducted by behaviourists is focused on animals such as rats and pigeons, which may not reflect the way behaviour is learned by humans. So this is a problem as the approach may be limited in its ability to explain human behaviour. Okay. Again, pause me. Furthermore, the approach may be criticised for being reductionist. Okay, so this means the approach reduces human behaviour down to the activity of specific variables such as the environment, and this reduces the role that biological internal factors may play. For example, twin studies have shown that genes seem to play a role in many aspects of human behaviour. This is a problem because the behavioural approach may be limited and oversimplify complex behaviours which require a more holistic explanation. Okay, so now we're moving on to a recap of social learning theory. Again, you can make your record cards with this, your revision notes, however you want to do this. So hopefully you're shouting out Albert Bandura. But if you want to pause me here and get this down and then check your missing words. So we learn indirectly, vicariously, through observation and the imitation of role models. Again, pause me. If an individual observes a behaviour being reinforced, known as vicarious reinforcement, they are likely to imitate this behaviour themselves. Bandura demonstrated this in his study where children observed an aggressive an adult being aggressive towards a Bobo doll. Again, pause me. So people, especially children, are more likely to imitate the behaviour of people with whom they identify, called role models. This process is called modelling. A person is a role model if they are similar to the observer or who are attractive or have higher status. Okay, remember, I can't show you here, remember arm off by heart. I'll be annoying you doing that in lesson when we get back. So SLT differs to behaviourism because it suggests that there are, hopefully you're saying the correct words there, mediational processes, and they are attention, retention, reproduction and motivation. Learn that off by heart, you will be fine with the social learning theory. Okay, so again, pause me. So the strength of the SLT is that it has practical applications. So this means concepts like identification and modelling have been used not necessarily for therapy, but to encourage positive behaviour. We see these in action all the time. Your parents will have used these with you. Your teachers will. So it's a positive as it can be used in the media and everyday situations to improve behaviour. Okay. Again, another strength, if you want to pause me now, it's less deterministic than the behavioural approach. So this means that the approach does not suggest our behaviour is totally caused by factors outside of our control, like the behavioural approach, but instead suggests that we have an ability to mediate, which helps explain why we all don't respond in the same way to the environment. So this is a positive because the approach is more of a middle ground between determinism and free will. Okay, so work to complete, and the deadline is Friday the 12th of June. I would like you to do an essay plan on the social learning theory. So in the top box is the description, and then you've got your 5 evaluation paragraphs. You can use those, some of those quiz questions, what we just did then as well. You've probably already done your revision notes going along, or you can work on those. You also need to complete the Seneca quiz on social learning. Please complete it by the deadline. That is on the Sunday, which will be the 14th. I've given you a bit longer for that because obviously you've got to learn it first. but please stick to that deadline because it means me having to unlock the quiz again. If you've got a problem with the deadline, let me know before then, please. Also update your glossary with all those keywords there. And we're going to look at the exam questions now. I've put the next slide, but what I've decided to do is do a video to help you out with that. So if you look out for the video on that, but there is some slides here to help you with an application question if you don't want to watch it on the video. Okay, so I hope this has been of help. Keep asking questions, keep emailing. If you're struggling with deadlines for whatever reason or there's something you don't quite get, then just email me. Thank you.